Nice to see you. This kind of action.
I have 5:45, and we will call the meeting to order. If everyone would stand for the moment of silence and pledge. Everyone would face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Recorder, if you would call the roll.
Chairperson Laura Harrison.
Present.
Vice Chairperson Jeremy Burnett.
Here.
Keith Acton.
Present.
Deborah Thomas.
Present.
Michelle Childs.
Here.
Superintendent Horrell.
Here.
You have a quorum. Mr. Superintendent, would you like to lead us through our agenda?
I will, thank you. The first item on the agenda is the opportunity for public comment.
Anyone from the public like to speak? Hearing none, next item.
Next item is our report section, starting with the TLN representative update from Ms. Childs.
Okay. The General Assembly has been very busy on education, so I have a few to get through. And for those new to our audience tonight, right now the legislatures are they're part-time and they're in Nashville, and they are in the midst of passing laws that will affect, some will be immediate and some will be for next school year. Okay, so Right now, most of the committees have closed, which is an indicator that the General Assembly will be done shortly. They don't really know exactly how long, but probably in a few weeks. First one, let's up a little bit. SB 371, HB 715. This was this was on TSBA's agenda to use TANF funds for schools, but the Department of Human Services opposed this, so it's been taken off notice. TSBA was told that schools will be able to get more information about applying for grants in lieu of that bill. SB 1330, HB 1201 involved support organizations being able to have lotteries, cakewalks without going through a specific arduous form. But they were told that they would need a constitutional amendment, so that is off notice and it will come back next year. SB 208, HB 255 was having every child have a free breakfast and lunch, but there was not enough funding, so that bill has died. SB 1220, HB 432 is still alive, it still may happen. It's in regard to Future Teachers Scholarship Act of 2023, so it's about teachers being able to be reimbursed if they're targeted, for targeted areas if they work there for 4 years. SB 712, HB 670 was kind of being called a kindergarten retention act, where students would have to be 7 years old or pass a proficiency test in kindergarten to move up to first grade, but that one has been taken off notice. TSBA did say that legislators had plans to bring this back next year and focus more on math scores. SB 1419, HB 1130. This was student assignment where addresses could not be used, but that bill has died now. SB 274, HB 322 will require schools to have locked doors for security, and that one is still making its way through. It will penalize schools if they're caught without doors being locked, and funds can be withheld. SB 1400, HB 1174 is still making its way through, and it would fund an SRO at every school. There are two bills that expand vouchers, SB 12, HB 433, and this is really more targeted to Hamilton and Knox County, but it's still making its way through. SB 638, HB 559 is an expansion, and it makes the funds retroactive, and that one's just waiting on signatures. SB 1325, HB 1202 would have allowed staff to carry concealed weapons without the district knowing who's carrying them, and that one is not going to be heard. It's done. HB 784, SB 556 is it's still making its way through, and it would allow teachers to be reimbursed for taking assessments like Praxis. HB 959, SB 973 is an open enrollment bill. It has passed Senate and will be heard in the House. If this passes, city employees would no longer be guaranteed slots at school districts. They would have to go into a lottery. It also has some unfunded mandates involved in that. Finally, the third grade retention that everyone's been following. there were 16 bills, and the one that, they were all combined into one, that they're looking at, SB 300, HB 437. And this would involve having benchmarks, but it's unclear right now which benchmark will be permitted. It's implied that, well, it's unclear right now. It would be the most recently administered, and it would have to be in a test environment. I will also add that I watched the State of Tennessee School Board meeting a couple weeks ago, and with the current law the way it is, they could not define what metrics students would need to improve on at summer school this summer. So they put that decision off until May 19th. So we are still unclear with the way the law currently works on what it's gonna look like this exact summer. And then if the law changes, then of course there will be changes to that as well. Okay. I think that's it. So what questions do you have?
Questions from the board? Mr. Burnett?
Ms. Childs, I know on the SRO at every school, public and private, I think there was a press conference this afternoon by the governor. Is there any discussion, or what's the fiscal impact? Because that's already built into the TISA funding, correct? So is this just expanding that to private schools, or what's the net impact for us? Passes.
So just on the TISA funding, the full cost of an SRO is actually not built into the funding. So what they did build into the funding that had previously been part of separate grants was coordinated school health that Ms. Warren, who is here, oversees, and then the school safety grant that Mr. Adler, who is also here, happens to oversee. So they're both sitting right there. Those have typically been separate grants that came down through the state. The funding for those grants has now been rolled into the base of TISA, but to be clear, the school safety grant did not fund the full cost of an SRO. Now what we have a hybrid situation in Lakeland School System. We have two fabulous SROs, Officer Luna and Officer Potts at Lakeland Preparatory School, who we have an MOU with the Shelby County Sheriff's Department, and we pay a very, very small portion of their salary or their expenses through that MOU. And we use those safe school funds to do that. And that's kind of been the Sheriff Department's justification for, really taking any money at all, is that there is some money allocated for that. And then we have the also equally fabulous Officer Cox at Lakeland Elementary School, who is our armed security officer that is an employee of Lakeland School System. We don't get any funds to basically help cover his salary. What we would like is obviously that all these positions would be funded by the state and adequate funding be provided. So I'm not sure exactly what direction they'll go, but to answer that question, even right now, they're not fully funded.
Right, okay.
I would have to get more information. I don't know exactly the details of that one.
Great, well, thank you. Thank you both.
Absolutely.
Questions? Go ahead. What's the 973, did it pass through Senate committee, and now it's going to House committee, and then to the whole?
So it passed through Senate subcommittee, and then this week it's up for House subcommittee. But it seems like if it makes it there, it's going to go to the floor.
Okay. Neither is at the floor yet. They're only.
Correct.
Okay. So on Wednesday is the House Education Administration Committee that will hear it, right?
Yes.
On Wednesday. Okay, gotcha. Thank you for going through all those. That's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
The two that are active on vouchers, what was the retroactive comment? I'm kind of missed that.
Yeah, to be honest, I need to get more information on that, but I know it somehow made certain, I think it was having to do with the students that the bill that was originally targeting, the big voucher bill that originally targeted Shelby County students and Nashville students, and then it was held up in courts. So I'm not really sure, but I know it was targeting that and going back. So I don't know if those parents would get something or the schools. I'm not sure exactly the details on that one.
Then the locked door one, is that specifically during school hours or school functions? Was there a definition there?
I heard it defined, my understanding was school hours.
Yeah.
I don't think there's been any contemplation of, football games or basketball games or theater nights.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I believe it's during the school day when your safety measure is that door will be locked. And then if they, I guess, come do surprise visits and find doors that are unlocked, that's where the penalty would come in.
Next item.
Next item is the superintendent's report. I do have a few things that I'll report. The first two, I just want to note something that I know is on people's minds, and it's certainly on our minds, and it's in our discussions on staff, and that's school safety. We want to, take a moment and remember and recognize the tragedy that happened in Nashville at the Covenant School. Certainly every time that there is an incident like that, it causes us to refocus and redouble our efforts to be sure that we're doing what we can, everything we can to make sure that students are safe and staff are safe at school. And yet I know that we all have an interest in making sure that students get the whole experience of school. So things like, recess and athletics, as we've talked about. So it certainly is always a reminder to reflect on what happens in these situations. Unfortunately, there are more situations and opportunities to reflect, I know, than any of us would like to. But if we could just take a moment and have a moment of silence, if that's appropriate for that tragedy. And then let's also include in that all of the victims of the tornadoes that tore through. I know there were a lot of communities affected by that. We're probably the one that hits closest to home for us is our Tipton County Schools friends. We play in athletic leagues with them and share a lot of things and just geographically, but also otherwise in common with Tipton County Schools. They almost completely lost one school, Crestview Elementary, and maybe Crestview Middle. It's going to take a lot to do that. So if we could, we'll just take a moment of silence on that as well. The thing we've spent the most time lately talking about as a school system, certainly the central office staff, is our budget. And I want to recognize Jessie Rosales, who is here, and she'll be here to answer any questions. I'll be doing the presenting part of it, but most of the credit certainly goes to Ms. Rosales for getting that budget together. We'll be doing that a little bit later. I did want to note that I spoke to Lakeland City Manager Michael Walker today to get on the schedule. I typically go and present the overview of our budget to the Board of Commissioners, and we're also going to give them the opportunity to meet individually with me if they would like to and have any questions answered about the budget, assuming that it gets passed tonight. If it doesn't, then we will wait and have those conversations once it does get passed. But I want to thank the board, even before we get to that item, for your engagement in the budget process, not only your engagement throughout the year leading up to it, but our individual meetings on the budget were, I think, the most engaged and in-depth and really specific discussions that I've experienced. So I feel really good about the work that we've done together and appreciate everybody's involvement with that. I did want to give an update that's been several years in the making. As of last week, we did get in hand the quitclaim and easement documents from the Jones family regarding Campus Drive. So it's funny, that's something we've wanted for so long, and what we get now that we have those is the opportunity to spend some of our money to build that road and extend it from where it ends now on the Lakeland Prep campus to US 70. But joking aside, that is exciting to have that in hand. It's currently registered by the Shelby County Registrar's Office, and Renaissance Group is finalizing the documents for the bid that we plan to put out, a public bid for the extension of that drive. We are also putting in add alternates to, and I've mentioned this as well, but it's still in the works and being finished up. We've made a lot of progress to extend, to formally pave the road. There's currently an MLGW gravel road from the bus loop over to the annex, and so we wanted to go ahead and put in what it would take to do that, and also have a walking trail from Lakeland Prep to the annex that would be part of the same project. We have another add alternate that would be, we just want to find out. We want to find out what it would cost. That would be additional parking at the annex that would more than double the amount of parking that is there. So that would still be on the site, on the side of the, on the other side of lateral B, as we have grown to know it, and would also still leave room in the master plan for the tennis courts that may someday go there, but we at least want to leave the space for it. So I will say, as we've worked through the designs on things, got a number of things we're trying to do. We're also trying to do a 10-yard widening of the on-campus soccer field so that it could be appropriate for tournament play for the soccer team. And as we get all those numbers in, it's going to shape our 5-year capital plan, and then you as a board and we as an administration will just have to make some decisions about the best use of those dollars. I will say, putting together the plans for the connection road from the circular drive over to the annex, it's a more extensive project to do that the way it needs to be done than I had initially thought. You'd think there's a gravel road, we could pave it and give some access, but by the time you talk about retaining walls and safety and crossing over the box culvert that's there and making sure it's safe for passengers and pedestrians, lighting, to make sure the lighting's appropriate there, it does become a bit of a project. So I'll be keeping the board up to date on that as well. We're going to hear from Mr. Adler. As I mentioned, he's going to give us an update on the Master Review predictive assessment results that is all leading towards our end of cap and TCAP testing. We now have that schedule published, and we're about 2.5 weeks from the start, or 2 weeks really, more like it at the elementary school, 2.5 weeks at the middle school from the start of that testing. And I want to commend Mr. Adler and our instructional facilitators that have, between them, gathered more data than we've ever had, presented that data in a way that I think is more clear than the teachers have ever had it. So I think the teachers and the students have every opportunity to really put that to use and make sure the students can show what they know, and maybe even more importantly, make sure they're prepared for next year as one step leads to another. So again, it's not just the test, but it's making sure that we know what the students know and that the teachers have an opportunity to remediate there. I want to talk just a little bit about grants. Sometimes we talk about the grants as they come through on the budget, but just for the public to know really, and maybe even the board, we very aggressively pursue grants and additional sources of funding. We had a couple recently that went opposite directions, unfortunately, but I did want you to know we applied. Ford had an application for some community development grants. We did apply for one of those grants, and we did not get it. But we did get kind of the gift that keeps on giving, and this is one that, again, it's just coincidence. They're just sitting right here. Or maybe they just do everything. I don't know. Ms. Warren was very involved with the ELC grant, which was a testing grant that we used during COVID to get our COVID tests originally. There were multiple opportunities to get funds from that. We were able to use some of those funds to build out our second clinic at Lakeland Preparatory School, and we just recently found out that because we applied again through the same grant, we got another $92,900 that we can also put towards health and safety. So again, I don't want people to take for granted that we just take the money that's in the budget and kind of go from there. We're constantly, and Tammy Wilson's a huge part of that, our federal grants coordinator, and Ms. DeLoso works carefully with everybody as well, or closely. We're constantly looking for additional sources of funds. So we're really, really proud to have gotten those funds as well. I did want to give this will be breaking news even for Ms. DeLoso because it's changed in the last several hours. But I had the opportunity to go to the TOSS Legislative and Learning Conference last week, and also had the opportunity to go down to the Capitol and do some advocating on behalf of Lakeland School System. We had a great talk with the majority of the members of the State Board of Education and had a great session from them, and was able to do some advocating with them as well. But one of the things that was made clear is that for this summer, our summer learning camps, we've been working under the assumption that we would only have the funds to offer those camps to the third graders from this year that need remediation, and then also their bridge camp funds that we were told that we would get, and that's for rising 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. I'm looking for Ms. Deloso to either give me the nod or shake her head. It was mentioned at the conference that there was a possibility that we would get all the funds that we've gotten for the last 2 years, which is significantly more funds than we currently have budgeted and planned. And what I just found out, just before this meeting, it's maybe not what you want to know, but those funds are tied up in the governor's budget. There's some legislation that's currently under consideration that would approve those funds. So they're not officially out there yet, but they're thinking that they may be soon. So they have not yet been allocated. So there was some confusion as to whether or not we were supposed to know that they had been allocated, but as it turns out, we were on the same page, or on the right page the whole time. So we are hoping we get those funds, but plans for the summer programming are certainly nearly finalized, and it's going to be here before we know it. So we're looking forward to finding out what's happening there. And that concludes my report.
Were the state board members share an understanding that it's hard for school districts to be in April and still not know what May, June planning would look like?
I think they were. I think they, Robert Eby is the chair, and he, as you know, because you also listened to or watched the call that I watched, he was a bit frustrated with the lack of clarity on what happened, and I addressed him at the conference, and I said, Mr. Eby, I think you were all of us at that time, and we're all frustrated and need this information as soon as we can get it. But I told him, thank you for insisting that it be clear, because that's really what we need. Our State Board of Education is really kind of a remarkable group. They're very engaged and want to be engaged with the school districts, which my understanding from my limited experience has not always been the case. But I think they've really made efforts to get out and improve their outreach and make sure they're meeting with superintendents.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I understood why they needed more information, because they were given the information about summer camp, like how much third graders would need to show improvement in order for it to count. Because it's not just, assuming the law doesn't change, it's not just that if they're approaching, it's not just that they go to the camp. They have to have a certain attendance, and they have to show progress, and they could not decide on what that progress looked like because they were given the information very late. And they did seem sympathetic to it, but it sounds like it's not even just that. It's also like even just simply which grades you're even going to be providing for camp starting next month or the next.
Yeah,
So
the details just aren't there,
Right.
unfortunately.
Items. I do have one question. So the campus drive, do you have a time, now that we have the deed, or it's being processed or whatever, registered, do you have any update or rough on timeline as far as when we expect it to come before the board, the plan, or to go out to bid, all of that, the approvals, kind of like, and kind of walk us through a very high-level timeline now that,
Give me just a second.
Yes.
I have maybe just what you.
and there's several parents that sit the traffic daily, and I know it would alleviate some of that about that.
Let's hope. They may just be sitting in different parts of the campus, or the community. But no, so this is what I'll call targets that we've agreed on. This is what we'd like to do, and some of this may be a stretch. We'd like to release the advertisement for the bids on April 10th, and then possibly have a bid opening on May 23rd. And once you get, the bid opening, then it would come back before the board for approval, to approve the budget and the contract itself. And then hopefully you're looking at a summer start at that point. There is a conversation as far as financially, if it's in our best interest to put a hard due date with liquidated damages or to not. So we're kind of trying to decide the best approach there. Some contractors are going to charge you more if there's a hard due date, and there's a chance they're going to get charged the money back. We technically have, we'd like it as soon as possible, but we technically have the time to get it done. So that has yet to be decided.
Hey, you said April 10th we'd put the ad out, and May 23rd the bid would be open. Is that target dates, are those correct?
Let me make sure these match up. That does seem like a lot of time. Let's see.
I was about to say it's a 5-week.
I think that what the architects were talking about was the 10th was, maybe that's wrong. They were talking about a pre-bid meeting on the 25th, deadline for questions on the 4th, addenda out by the 8th at the latest, and then the 23rd. So we may have scooched back that April 10th. Maybe, I think the target though is the May 23rd for the bid opening. Whatever it backs up from there.
It's always, just for clarity, the road going from 70, that's always been by the time our freshmen are juniors,
Correct.
August of 20.
That's right. That's the city's deadline,
24,
basically.
August
Sorry,
of 24, yeah.
23, 24, yep.
Gotcha.
So essentially about 12, 14, 16 months
12 to-
from,
yeah.
from now.
To finish
roughly.
it, yeah.
Will be an active turn signal there, or?
Don't believe so.
There's not a turn signal in the plans.
Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, that's per TDOT, and that's not our decision. That's.
Dr. Roy, I think you, correct me if I'm wrong, you said that was the feedback from TDOT, that would put too many lights too close together between CTIC and Canada, or?
I don't
am
want to speak for
misremembering?
TDOT. I think some of that was speculation, but I guess my understanding is that there has not been one acquired by.
For the superintendent? Hearing none, next item.
Next item is the approval of the agenda.
I was going to request that the board, with and without objection, to move item 2, 4, 5, 6, and 12 to the consent agenda.
Can I just make a point of
Yes.
order? I think that would go over the consent agenda item next, right?
No, we have to have the agenda right to approve it. The agenda, and then I'm gonna make a modification to it after I just approve it.
I think you would approve what's on the agenda and then move certain items to the consent agenda, I believe. But I may be mistaken.
I mean, that's fine.
I may be mistaken on that.
I say we take Dr. Horrell's advice and let's approve the total agenda and then immediately move those items from the discussion to the consent.
A motion to approve the agenda as presented?
Can I make a request on the actual
Yes.
agenda? I'd like to request that we remove item 7 totally take it off the agenda. Then add 2 items to the agenda. One is discussion action on approval of the family life curriculum. The next is discussion action on approval of the 23-24 salary schedules. Oh, okay, all right, thank you. And then one more item, and then approval of the 23-24 stipend list.
Essentially a new 15, 16, 17.
Yes.
If you're, or do you leave?
Well, I guess we,
16, 17.
I think 16, 17, 18.
Just strike 7.
So, striking item 7, adding item 16 as family, the superintendent, yes. So
Family life.
family life curriculum, and then item 17 is the 23-24 salary schedule, and item 18 is the 23-24 stipend schedule.
That's it?
Well, first, we have to make a motion to get the approval of the agenda on the board.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
So now I think it would be appropriate to discuss any removal or adding or anything regarding the recommendations or requests by the superintendent.
I'd like to start by moving item 7 from tonight's agenda entirely.
So we have a, a request by Mr. Burnett to remove item 7. And then, would you like to add 16, 17, 18?
I'd like to discuss those individually.
Okay, so is there any objection to removing item 7? Hearing none, that item will be stricken from the agenda. Now let's take item 16, which the superintendent requested, the family life curriculum. Is there any discussion about adding that to the agenda? Any,
Do we have a motion?
yes, we can make a motion on each amendment. So
Make a motion to approve all.
17 and 18, would the board like to consider them individually or all?
I'm okay with all.
Okay, so we have a motion to add 16 for family life curriculum, 23, 24 salary schedule, and the 23 stipend. For a second? We have a motion and a second. Now is there discussion on adding those items to the agenda? Hearing none, all in favor of adding family life curriculum at 16, 23, 24 salary schedule as 17, and 23, 24 stipend schedule as number 18, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Amendment passes, so now we're back on the agenda.
Madam Chair, if I could,
Yes.
those would now then be 15, 16, 17, right? Since we took 7 off.
Technically, so we'll add it, we'll do it that way. Oh, that's gonna be so confusing.
I'm so sorry.
It's
I think
okay.
we can just stick with the numbers and, or
Thank
she'll
you.
renumber, yeah.
Keep us.
Okay. I'm gonna renumber them or I'm gonna get confused, so just give me, if y'all will bear with me. Now, I've renumbered them. All right, so that would be 15, 16, 17 are now we're back on the agenda. Is there any more discussion on the approval of the agenda as amended?
I have a question.
Yes.
What were you saying you wanted to put on the consent agenda?
I would like to put item 2, the approval of the business meeting minutes. Item 4, the discussion on, action on policy 4.200 attendance. The item that is a second reading on policy 6.406 performance enhancing supplements. The item 4.600 grading system, and the 2023 spring discard list. Items I would like to move to the consent agenda.
You consider adding 10.
Then I think there's a presentation on it.
Not on the capital improvement plan.
Okay, okay.
We're good.
Oh, no. Do I have them out of order? Okay, which 10, the new 10 or the old 10?
The capital improvement.
Okay,
CIP.
yes, okay. So that's my 9, that's what I was confused. Yes. So any objection on, yes. So the approval of the business meeting minutes from March 2nd, 2023, the 4.200 attendance, the 6.406 performance enhancing supplements, the 4.600 grading system, the 24-28 CIP, and the 23 spring discard list. Or numbers, because I didn't know which ones to. Yes, if you will read those items back, and I would like to move that we add those, or move those to the consent agenda. Yes, and if you'll read those back to the board so that we all know what we're voting on.
Approval of the meeting minutes. Discussion action on approval of policy 6.406 performance enhancing supplements, second reading. Discussion action on update to policy 4.600 grading system. Discussion action on approval of 2024 to 2028 capital improvement plan, and discussion action on spring 2023 discard list.
Objection by the board.
Just one clarifying question. On the second reading for policy, it is okay to put that on the consent agenda, given it's the second reading. Good?
Any objection by the board? Hearing none, the amendment passes. Now we're back on the agenda as amended. Hope y'all have good notes. All right. All in favor of approving the agenda as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is the consent agenda.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Would anybody like to pull anything off the consent agenda? Hearing none. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Next item.
Next item is our discussion items. We're going to begin with a presentation by Matt Adler, Director of Assessment, Accountability, and Data.
Mr. Adler, you have the floor.
By way of introduction, let me say that Mr. Adler was asked to take on this role of Director of Assessment, Accountability, and Data. And as I said, I think this has been a great move for the district. I think it's been a great asset for the district. And sincerely, when I say that the teachers have access to data that's organized in a way that's clear and easy to understand, and I think helps drive our decision-making and our instruction. I give a lot of that credit to him, and I really appreciate the way you've helped move us in that direction. And we look forward to hearing what the latest results were.
Well, thank you. Before I get started, first of all, thank you for allowing me to present to you all again. I can't believe we are in April, and this is the presentation of our final comprehensive benchmark. With some particulars, we gave this final benchmark in early March. And some background behind that is to allow time, even though that's still 4 weeks of instructional time before TCAP begins, is to allow time for the data to come back, to be processed, and to be given to teachers and administrators at the building level to be able to find areas that need possibly additional support and also areas to continue to strengthen it. I say all that because some of the numbers are not going to be numbers that we want to see, and other numbers are going to be some numbers that we can get excited about. But these are just progress checks. This is not something to get, hang your hat on and get too high about or get too low about. It is strictly a progress check to see where our kids are performing at early March while they have 4 more weeks of instruction. Actually, 22 days of instruction was left for LES and 24 days of instruction was left for LPS going into TCAP from when the benchmark was completed. And I wanted to say that before I get started with all the data and the particulars. As I said, the comprehensive benchmark was given in it was completed by early March, right before spring break. TCAP begins April 17th. That's a Monday, but actually our TCAP for LES starts on April 18th, and TCAP for LPS starts on that Thursday, which April 20th, I believe. Grades 2 through 9 were tested, and the contents area tested are the same areas that are tested at the state level. So for grade 2, it's the optional assessment for ELA and math. Grades 3 through 5, ELA, math, and science. Grades 6 through 8, ELA, math, science, social studies. The same for grade 8, along with the Algebra 1 EOC for selected students. And then for grade 9, it's our EOCs, which are for English 1, Algebra 1, geometry, and biology. So I broke this presentation down into basically 3 areas. How we performed on the final benchmark, some benchmark comparisons, and then the overall summary at the very end in terms of seeing improvements from benchmark 1 to benchmark 2, benchmark 2 to benchmark 3, benchmark 1 to benchmark 3 to see a beginning and an end, and then how we compare to last year's TCAP data. And I'm not going to go through every number, but we'll kind of broad stroke this since you've seen these numbers already. Our ELA results for grades 2, 3, and 4, as you can see, from benchmark 2 to benchmark 3 in all areas, they've improved. Some improved more than others, and then in comparison to last year's TCAP and the benchmark 3, there was a nice improvement in grade 2 with ELA, and in grade 3 and 4, there was improvement, but again, as I've said before, and I've said numerous times, single-digit improvements or decreases they could go either way when it comes to TCAP. But when we see double digits, it's improvements, that's really something to get excited about. And sometimes double-digit decreases are sometimes areas of concern, potentially. But again, it goes back to what I just previously said. There's still 4 weeks of instruction that are happening before we can really see what our final results are. Oh, you rubbed off on the clicker. And now I'm really in trouble. There we go. Grades 5 through 9, the middle school grades. Again, benchmark 2 to benchmark 3, you saw improvements in grade 9, but in all areas across the board, these are single digits. So again, it can go one way or the other when it comes to TCAP. When we compare it to where we were TCAP last year, we see that there was minor decreases with grade 6 and grade 8, and in grade 5 and grade 7. We have a little bit of work to do. That could be a possible area of concern, but that's why we do these benchmarks, to make sure we can address any reinforcements or any supports that we need to address to get these numbers to show better results. Math in grades 2, 3, and 4. Again, across the board, you saw improvements from the 2 benchmarks. And for comparison from TCAP to benchmark 3, saw a good improvement in grade 2, which is encouraging, and some improvement in grade 4. But again, grade 3 and 4, single digits. In grade 5 through 8, we saw some improvement in grade 6 and grade 8. And in grade 6, which grade 6 historically has been a kind of an area of concern because it's that transition from elementary minded to middle school mindedness, and what goes through them in terms of adolescence and in terms of going from a team of 3 to 6 classes, 7 classes a day. We've seen that previously. We've seen that ever since we've had middle grades. So that's encouraging to see some improvements there. What you did to me, Dr. Worrell. And with our EOCs, Algebra 1, Grade 8, Algebra 1, 9, and Geometry 9. In Algebra 1, we saw a good improvement from benchmark 2 to benchmark 3. And in Algebra 1 for Grade 9 and Geometry Grade 9, we also saw improvements, but we don't have a comparison to last year because this is our first year with those EOCs. Science. Again, across the board, single digits from grade 3 all the way to grade 9, which that last one, clicker is blocking it, but that's biology. We don't have a comparison. Biology was the most consistent from benchmark 2 to benchmark 3 at the same percentage of proficiency that our students are showing. And again, down the board, you have some single digits improvements or not so. Actually, there was only 2 areas that did not improve from the benchmarks, but comparing it to 22 TCAP, you can see those numbers, and again, most of them are single digits, so hopefully the 4 weeks of instruction support will improve across the board. And lastly, the social studies, which is our only grade 6, 7, and 8. You saw some improvement in grade 6 and grade 8 compared to the benchmarks. And then in terms of comparison to last year's TCAP, again, I don't want to use the area of concern as grade 6 or grade 7, but those double-digit decreases compared to TCAP, again, a lot more standards to be covered over the time with social studies because that's the one subject that has most of the standards to cover. But they had that time to cover, and those numbers should improve going forward. Now the benchmark comparisons, and when I'm talking about benchmark comparisons, because we just did benchmark 2 to compare to benchmark 3, this is for the full year, from benchmark 1, 2, and 3, to hopefully we can see some trends that are happening. For ELA, for grades 2 through 4, in grade 2, positive trend, each benchmark improved. Grade 3 saw the same thing, each benchmark improved. And grade 4, you saw improvements from each benchmark. That's all encouraging. And it's really encouraging for ELA because ELA was comprehensive from the very beginning. Each benchmark is comprehensive. Grades 5 through 9, that I can't pinpoint trends either fully positive or fully negative. Sometimes they went up for benchmark 2, then went back down. But then if you look at benchmark 1 to compare to benchmark 3, you saw some improvement. So that's why I've included some overall summaries at the very end. But you can see what's going on there. Grade 9, very encouraging. Without having a baseline to compare ourselves to, there was improvement from benchmark 1, benchmark 2 to benchmark 3. Math, grades 2 through 4, again, saw in grade 2 a trending positively. In grade 3, this is something that we've talked about that I just said, where it was for benchmark 1 higher than benchmark 2, but then benchmark 3 was higher than benchmark 2. So who knows what's going to go on there with grade 3. And with grade 4, pretty consistent from benchmark 1, benchmark 2 to benchmark 3. Grade 5 through 8, and this is non-EOC. You see that in grade 5, there's improvement from benchmark 3 to benchmark 1. Same in grade 6, improvement for each benchmark. That's encouraging. In grade 7, relatively consistent. And in grade 8, there is significant improvement from benchmark 2 to benchmark 3. And I would say benchmark 1 and benchmark 3 are relatively consistent. For our EOCs, Algebra 1, for 8th grade, Algebra 1 for 9th grade, there's improvements with Algebra 1 for the 8th graders. And then Algebra 1 for 9th grade, which is significant historically from a state side. It is a hard subject to work above the state average right now, even though that's a low percentage. The state average for proficiency for Algebra 1 from last year is about 15%. So because that's every student in the state taking Algebra 1. And in geometry, those are our 8th grade honor students, or 9th grade honor students, and they're showing improvement across the board.
I think we have some 9th graders here. How many of y'all are in geometry? You guys here?
Awesome.
Good job.
Y'all are killing it. And Aubrey's my #1 fan. She came to my last presentation too, so I thank you, Aubrey. Appreciate that. For science, grades 3 through 4, improvement across the board in grade 3 and in grade 4, pretty consistent. Doesn't get much more consistent than what you see in grade 4. And in grade 5 through 8, which are the achievement tests, again, you're seeing some consistency, some improvements, and even the ones that did not improve are staying consistent. So again, it's constant, it's good instruction that's happening, and we just need to push a little bit more for these last few weeks. And then biology, again, consistency is the word of the day. And then finally, our benchmark comparisons for grades 6 through 8 social studies. Again, grade 6, 50-50, benchmark 1, benchmark 3. Same thing with grade 7 and same thing with grade 8. Consistency across the board, which is encouraging. The teachers are teaching the standards, and what can we do to push the kids a little bit further, which is the decision for the teachers, the PLCs, the school level administration, and how to attack it going forward. So the overall summary, because that was a lot of numbers. Benchmark 1 to benchmark 2. In ELA, there were improvements in grades 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, and 9. In math, grades 2, 5, 6, 7, and geometry improved from benchmark 1 to benchmark 2. In science, grades 3, 4, 5, 7, and 8. And in social studies, there was an improvement from benchmark 1 to benchmark 2 in grade 8. Benchmark 2 to benchmark 3, students performed better on benchmark 3 in grades 2, 3, 4, and 9 in ELA. In math, they performed better on benchmark 3 in grades 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, Algebra 1, both 8 and 9, and in geometry. And in science, they performed better on benchmark 3 in grades 3, 5, and 6, and in social studies, grades 6 and 8. They performed better on benchmark 3 compared to benchmark 2. So now we look at a beginning and an end, which benchmark 1 to benchmark 3. And if you look at that, in ELA, students perform better on benchmark 3 in grades 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, and 9. That's almost across the board, which is encouraging. In math, grades 2, 5, 6, 7, Algebra 1 in 8th grade, and in geometry in 9th grade. In science, grades 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8. And again, that's almost across the board, missing grade 7 in biology. And in social studies in grade 8, there was improvement in benchmark 3 compared to benchmark 1. Finally, where were the improvements on benchmark 3 compared to where they were in TCAP? And that means, did they perform better on benchmark 3 compared to where they were last year? But again, last year was, again, 2 months later or a month and a half later in terms of when they were taking that test. Where this year it's early March and they haven't got to April yet. So it's kind of apples to oranges, but it's still, again, a little progress check. And in ELA, grades 2 and 3 showed improvements on benchmark 3 compared to where they were last year on TCAP. And in math, grades 2, 4, and 6 showed improvements on benchmark 3 compared to where they were last year with 4 weeks of instruction still left to go. And with that said, do you have any questions for me or for Dr. Worrell preferably? I'm kidding.
So at this point, have the parents of the third graders been informed each step of the way on like how they're doing and how that may impact their summer plans or summer vacations next school year with the law the way it's written?
Yes, I believe they have. I believe Ms. Lockhart, Mr. Loso, and Ms. Nelson, our instructional facilitator or our instructional supervisor for elementary, have been with that process and they've sent letters home. They've looked at numbers in terms of benchmarks, excluded the students that can be excluded based on the law, and informed parents that are either possibly in danger of having to come back for summer camp and possibly, or ones that most likely will be coming back, but that was all done school level and it's continuing to be done, and we'll see what happens with the TCAP. The state has promised us, the last meeting I went to, the state said that they would have third grade TCAP back to us, or back to school districts, before school ends.
The state school board meeting, they said that they would have the raw numbers. I think it was mid-May. I think that's what they said.
They've been promising like the week of the 20th.
They also, and I meant to say this in my report, but they also said that students would have an opportunity to retest TCAP ELA after school is over.
Correct.
And then they may take a third time if they go to the summer camp.
The actual retake window begins on May 30th, from May 30th to June 4th, I believe.
That sounds right. And they said that those, that particular one would come back in 48 hours.
Correct. That'll be done online, most likely through SchoolNet, I'm assuming, or some platform like that where the data can be generated quickly.
I want to thank you for the reports that we get, because it really helps us see the specific areas where our own child may, need to focus on. So with the third benchmark happening when it does, you're not only talking about an additional 4 weeks of instruction after that for some new material that hasn't even gotten taught the first time, but also the ability for the teacher to look at the data and say, oh, we need to hit that standard a little harder, let's go back before we take the TCAP.
I actually had a conversation with an administrator at LES this morning about that, and then the PLCs, their item analysis that that each teacher gets back.
Right.
The PLCs they looked at 3 standards that were all primarily red. And they're like, well, we're teaching that this week, next week, and the week after, which those standards weren't even taught yet. So the children in early March did not have a chance to do well unless they guessed well.
Right.
Where there's more teaching and there's review that's gonna happen, there's reinforcement that's gonna happen, there's more intervention that's gonna happen. So this is all positive.
And how, I know we've talked about this before, how does third benchmark typically compare to TCAP in terms of, I don't want to say difficulty, but in terms of how kids typically score on one compared to the other?
It is, from last year, it was within 10%,
Really? Okay.
if I remember correctly.
So
It's a pretty good indicator.
And this is it's a great tool. It's a great tool too, because the first benchmarks, ELA is the only one that has all the standards from the beginning, right?
Correct.
And then the others are kind of going with pacing guides and which ones do we want to.
Based on what's been submitted by the
Right,
schools.
right. So that, it's really good to see the trends going up, and I'm in favor of having all this data to help teachers hit those standards, particularly the ones that are heavy, where the blueprint is heaviest.
Right.
So,
And really, the most important piece of data that a teacher can have are the item analyses.
oh, yeah.
Because they're color-coded, and you can look quickly visually, and even the PLCs that put all their data together, you can look at what standard was missed across the board, or what standard does not need to be touched on, or just reviewed upon going forward, and you
Right.
can focus your do nows with that, you can focus your review on that, you can focus, okay, what have we not taught? What, do we need to speed up our pace to get our standards in? Or do we need to look at ones that the majority are missing and just hit those? So there's a lot of advantages to those item analyses.
For all of this, and I know the teachers are grateful to get all that extra support to,
I hope they are.
yeah, I'm sure they are, I'm sure they are.
No, thank you, Mr. Idler, for being here as always. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for your presentation.
And
your
thank you,
information.
students, for doing such a good job, too. I'm very proud of all of you. Good job. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna see if you get it right. Next item is a test.
Item is, didn't get that part right. Next item is discussion action on resolution 2023-0401, resolution, yeah, that's right. Resolution authorizing the executive committee to market and sell property at 9605 Old Brownsville Road.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Horrell, will you speak to this item?
Yes, this is a kind of a continued part of the culmination of our decision, or your decision as a board, to go ahead and move forward with the construction of an independent central office. Just to refresh everybody's memory, the property at 9605 Old Brownsville is two adjacent, well, the 96 Old Brownsville is one piece of property. It is a 5-acre piece of property that has a home. It was owned by the same ownership group, a trust, in fact, that owned the property next door, which is about 20 acres. Lakeland School System wanted to purchase the 20-acre tract of land, basically to land bank it for what I believe will be, I don't want to say distant future, but fairly far out. At the point, presumably, when we wouldn't have enough room at Lakeland Prep to house both a middle and a high school together in the same building. Now, presumably, in the meantime, at some point, we would build a second elementary school that would pull out one, maybe two grade levels from Lakeland Prep. So to say that we've got some time before we would need that 20-acre piece of property, I think is probably an understatement. However, long story short, we bought the 5-acre property with the home because we wanted the 20-acre property next door, and it felt like it was necessary to buy both to achieve the goals of the school system. Having done the due diligence to determine whether or not the house may or may not be an appropriate site for a central office, we determined that it would not be feasible or desirable for the school system. So the proposal now is that we go ahead and sell the 5-acre property with the house and see if we can get some funds that could be used towards some of these other capital projects that we've talked about, namely the construction of a central office and the extension of Campus Drive to US 70.
Discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is discussion action on approval of the 2023-26 Pupil Transportation Services Agreement.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Horrell?
Yes, again, just to refresh everybody's memory, transportation is one area where we are in shared services agreements with several other districts, and we utilize the transportation routing services and supervision of Collierville School System, and we basically share the routing and the transportation supervision between Collierville, Germantown, Arlington, Lakeland, and Bartlett. So as those 5 school systems, we went in together and put out an updated bid, a bid from scratch on pupil transportation services. There were 2 responsive bidders. One was First Student. The other one was Durham, who we currently utilize for our transportation. The First Student proposal for Lakeland, and we do look at these individually, and again, Mr. Adler's involved in transportation as well, so he attended these meetings on behalf of the school system and reported back that the First Student proposal would have equated to an increase of approximately 58% of what we currently contribute, and Durham's price equates to a cost of an increase of 16.4% of what we contribute. Ms. Rosales will say I don't know math real well, but I do know 16.4 is a lot less than 58% in terms of an increase. So from that point, the groups decided to negotiate on the details of the contract, and they included making sure that we were still able to essentially fine Durham for things like doubling up routes or not having the appropriate number of bus drivers. There was, some pushback on some of those areas, but we pretty much stuck to our guns and feel like we wound up with a contract itself that is appropriate for our needs. So I am bringing this to you. This is the same contract that's being voted upon by the other 4 school system boards, but I'm bringing this to you with my recommendation.
Any discussion?
My question would be, the 16.4, is this compared to the last year's budget and our total, not budget, but actuals?
Yes.
Okay. And I noticed in reading this, I believe we're responsible for the cost of fuel, so that removes that variable from them. Does that sound correct?
Yes, we pay the fuel separately,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
Yep.
So I'm assuming their cost increases related to costs of labor, probably mechanical related items.
Yes, and if they have to purchase, I don't think there are new buses, required by this contract, but obviously if they have to replace buses, that's on them.
Similar to Mr. Acton's question, the 16.4% increase, would that also include the fact that we're probably transporting more pupils next year, more students? Since we're adding,
I don't believe that's actually factored in as the number. I think that was an apples to apples comparison of this year's contract versus the proposed future contract.
all right.
We have that factored in, but,
Yeah. And then, again, having had the experience of attending Germantown School Board's meeting last week, that they didn't give the percentage, but they said significantly more expensive, so it's nice to hear how much significantly more expensive it was.
I was just gonna say that I appreciate the group negotiation, because us being a small district, we would not have as much buying power if we didn't work together. So I appreciate the other munis that work with us and do that. Also, no school system is perfect, but as a parent whose children have and do ride the bus, I've been impressed with what Durham was able to do, especially during pandemic and bus drivers out. I think they managed it the best you could possibly manage that type of situation. And it seems like this year's a lot better than other years. The buses seem to be going everything seems a lot smoother and not as many late buses and double routes and things like that.
I think like with everything, it winds up being the people, and I think we've managed to get a more stable group of people that are driving our buses. We've got a great group of individuals that take care of our kids and are the first ones they see in the morning and the last ones they see in the afternoon in some cases. And the old joke is they do everything a teacher does, but they do it with their back turned, as far as management and so.
More comments about the board, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is discussion action on FY 22-23 budget amendments.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
So moved.
There's a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Horvath, would you speak to this item?
Yes, I'm going to take advantage of Ms. Rosales being here for the budget presentation and let her review the budget amendments for this current year.
The amendments are in 2 funds, Fund 141, which is our general fund, and Fund 142, which is federal programs. The amendments in the general fund are just transfers between functions with a net effect of 0, so we're just moving money within departments. But anytime we cross functions, we have to have those approved. So all of the general fund amendments are just transfers between programs, and there's an effect of 0 there. And then federal programs, as Dr. Worrell mentioned earlier, we have additional grant dollars for ELC, almost $93,000 that we have to have spent by the end of June. So we had to go ahead and budget those revenues. We just got approved for those a couple weeks ago. So we've added the revenue and the expenditures for that, and we need to get those down quickly. The other amendments in Fund 142 were just transfers within 2 other grant programs, Title III and the Resilient Communities Grant. We just saw as we got closer to the end of the year what our remaining needs were and are shifting those dollars within the function, once again, for a net effect of 0.
On this item? Mr. Burnett?
Just one being fairly familiar with federal grant programs, you don't anticipate having any concerns expending and reconciling or realizing those expenditures by June 30, do you? They're not going to roll over to next fiscal, correct?
These grants, the Title III money and the Resilient Communities School Grant money will not roll over, and neither will the new ELC dollars. So we do have to have all those fully expended, but we've budgeted them in categories that we feel confident will be expended prior to June 30 and us able to receive the reimbursement.
There's one thing we're better at than getting grants, it's spending grants. Our team is very conscious of that, and we try to make decisions on the grants that will allow us to not leave money on the table. That's a great question from somebody who's obviously dealt
Dealing with that
those
now.
challenges, yeah.
More discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is discussion action on approval of the fiscal year 2023-24 budget.
A motion to get this item on the floor?
So moved.
We have a motion. I'll make the second. Dr. Horr, would you?
I will. I'd be happy to. I think I'll be able to run the presentation from here, I think, and we've got that going on the screen. As the board certainly knows and the public knows, the budget is one of the most important things that we do in the course of a year. It is a reflection of the vision and the priorities of the board and the school system, and allows us to make sure that we're spending the assets that we have, which in most cases we recognize and realizes are taxpayer dollars for our publicly funded system, and make sure that we're putting them to the very best use. And our logo's there on the screen, and just as a reminder, because it's been a long time since we came up with that, but that star in the upper left-hand the corner, I guess you'd call it, of the shield, that is our guiding star, and that is student interest. And we try to make all our decisions in Lakeland school system based on that guiding star of what's in the student's best interests. And this budget is no exception. And I'll repeat, just as part of our process, over the course of typically more than a year, because we already have things that we want in next year's budget, we kind of compile lists of things based on board feedback, but also based on teacher and staff feedback and administrator feedback, and we put a list together of things that we would like to have included, and it winds up being just a huge lump of clay. And then at some point we have to shape that lump of clay into the budget you see, and in many cases we have to sometimes take some of the clay back and put it away because it's not all going to make it on there. But I do, again, want to recognize Jessie Rosales and then also Jessica Millspaw, who in addition to being our terrific board recorder, her day job is our Director of Human Resources, Payroll, and Benefits. So because the vast majority of the funds that we allocate go towards people, she spends a lot of time figuring out what it would cost to pay those people in these different scenarios and come up with something that we can all be proud of, and I certainly think we are. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and flip through. This is the high-level overview of the budget. Again, the board is familiar with this. They've seen it. They helped create it. And leading up to this, each of the board members sits down with me individually and has multiple opportunities to ask questions, to pick it apart, to get clarification. And again, they were very engaged and helpful and thoughtful in their comments and questions, which is certainly appreciated. So that being said, we usually start with the budget assumptions. So what are the numbers that we're using? And this is mainly important for generating the revenues, at least the first few numbers are, because the revenues that we get, now more than ever with the TISA funding formula, are based on the number of students in the building. That's what determines our state funds, and that's what determines our local required match, and a number of other things. So right now, what we're projecting for next school year in Lakeland School System in our special ed pre-K through 10th grade school system for next year is 2,277 students. We're projecting an increase of 218 students. The bulk of that is through the addition of the 10th grade level. We're projecting that 972 of those students would be at Lakeland Elementary School. That does not include those special needs preschool grades, which are actually not funded. We don't get any funding for those classrooms, even though we have 3 and maybe cruising towards 4, as we've been discussing, just with the number of students we serve. That's an increase of 5 students. And then we're projecting 1,305 students at Lakeland Preparatory School, an increase of 213 students. At LES, for this next year, we're actually, what we are proposing is 80 teachers, and when I say teachers, I want to note that's teachers, guidance counselors, that is anybody that goes in that category. So the specialty teachers, these aren't just the classroom, kind of grade level, second grade teachers. What's that? SLPs. Thank you. So lots of groups included there. We're actually projecting a reduction in the number of teachers by 2. And I want to just make a note on that, because obviously anytime you see something that looks like they're going to have 2 fewer teachers, you would like to know why. Last year, based on our registration numbers and a number of other factors, we didn't really get a good handle on the number of students that we had until right before school started. If people weren't people and it was, hey, this is how many we need, and it doesn't matter what the impact of that is on those people, we probably would have cut last year by 2 people. We're technically a little bit overstaffed this year. We did make the decision that what was in the best interest of the students was not to, at the last minute, surplus 2 recently hired teachers last year. And we had a conversation with Ms. Lockhart and spoke very frankly and said, we're going to let you keep those 2 extra teachers, but unless there's some massive influx this next year, we are going to reduce the total number by 2, and the hope was realized that that would be by attrition, basically. So we have teachers that have, 2 teachers in particular that are retiring, and 1 who has resigned. So that's where the -2 comes from. So we don't anticipate a surplusing where someone says, or we say, we're not going to be able to bring you back. But there would be 2 fewer teachers. As we've noted, the number of kindergarten enrollments has gone down over the last couple of years. We anticipate that continuing this year. As the demographer who does our projections for us explained, that's not out of a lack of interest in the school system or even a lack of new housing. It's just that the housing that we have is not turning over like it did at some point. And empty nesters, for the most part, we're finding more than they have in the past, are staying in their houses in Lakeland, whereas before they might have sold those houses, downsized, and move on. So we are seeing that those numbers of kindergartners getting smaller just because there's less housing available, even though there's rooftops going up everywhere you look. At LPS, we're projecting an increase in 14 teachers. As you would imagine, the majority of that is due to continuing to add grade levels and add staff for the high school that's necessary. All right, we've got a number of other budget assumptions for the, and I'll note that this is the 10th budget for Lakeland School System. This is the 10th time that we've brought a budget to Lakeland School System, and this is the 10th time that we've not requested any additional operational funds from the city of Lakeland outside the 15-cent equivalent that is required by state law for the city to fund the school system. As opposed to last year, we are not planning to use fund balance for the general fund operational budget. We did submit a deficit budget last year to make sure that we could get the high school started in the way that we felt like, again, was in the best interest of the students. But this year, we are presenting a balanced budget, even though we're continuing to increase the number of teachers and staff on campus. The increase in the general fund, which is really what we focus on. The board knows that we also have the grants funding, we have nutrition funding, we have our before and after school care funds. Those are different funds, but none as significant as the general fund, so that's, again, our focus. We've got an increase of total general fund budgeted revenues that's up about $3 million. Some of that is TISA. Some of that is the additional students. I'm going to estimate, so please don't go to the bank on this, but it's probably something close to half and half, I'd say. I'd say the TISA, maybe even a little less. The TISA is 1.2 to 1.5 million, and I think the other is additional students that would make up the bulk of the funding. Right, this budget includes step increases to all employees that are on step schedules. That would seem like a natural, but it has happened in districts sometimes that when other salaries are being increased, that the step increases are not being honored. This is the part we're probably most excited about, is this schedule, this budget contemplates a 3% increase in the teacher salary schedule and a 2% increase for all other staff. This is the first time as a school system that we have increase the teacher salary schedules by more than the other staff, but it is one of the goals, I think, of the school system. We talk a lot about how do we compensate teachers and how do we attract and retain teachers. A big part of that's through salary and benefits, certainly. So this would be a 3% increase to the teacher salary schedules. So that's just literally the teacher salary schedules, and then the SLPs and the OT-PT are the three categories that are getting that 3%. All other staff would get a 2%. And again, we have broken that out sometime. There have been years where the administrators didn't get it, or certificated staff got something, or some years classified staff got something. This year's 3% for teachers, 2% for all other staff. And to get into the details, what that means is 10 regular ed teachers at LPS, an additional special ed teacher at LPS. We're going to add a high school interventionist, so that's a second interventionist at LPS. Another EL teacher that we anticipate having a split schedule that would go back between LPS and LES as our English learners population continues to grow, but also with the additional grade level. The addition of a special ed assistant and a regular ed assistant at LPS. We are going to go ahead and add another high school counselor at LPS. This is probably getting a little bit ahead of it. We're right there on the line in terms of counselors with, having one with 9th and 10th grade. Because we could and figured out a way to do it, we wanted to err on the side of having that counselor and make sure we're offering that personalized support to the extent that we can. And we're also going to add the high school financial secretary position. We've actually already hired that person. In fact, she started today, or the other one started today, right? I get mixed up. Yeah, the new one started today, who I think will wind up at the middle school, and then the new secretary will start at the high school. But I did include that because the board graciously allowed us to go ahead and hire that one early. And then in addition of a high school SPED secretary that will also, we anticipate, have some clerical duties, just to make sure that they're being fully utilized until we do have the full build out there at Lakeland Preparatory School. So we don't anticipate that being just SPED, but right now I think the SPED needs are beyond what the one SPED secretary can do. The addition of a deputy principal position, and then one full-time and part-time custodian at LPS. We are looking at adding a floating school nurse that is in the budget. We're not certain that that will be necessary. This is very specific to some specific needs that we anticipate may be there, but may not. And so we may take some different approaches to that one, but wanted to be prepared in case a student who has the needs that we anticipate enrolls with us. This is at LES, the addition of a special education assistant and a regular education assistant. And at the district level, we have added a district facilities manager. We have completed, we're in interviews for those and anticipate making an offer here pretty soon. And the addition of a district HR clerk. This is another position that the board approved starting early and has already started, as is the case with the nutrition coordinator. That one is from Fund 143, but I did want to add it because it is a nice step for our school system and takes quite a bit of additional work off the aforementioned Ms. Rosales, who has been taking on that role for quite some time. These are minor, but we did want to note them. We're moving our EIS, which is basically our Skyward coordinator, Cindy Smith, from an 11-month position to a 12-month position. That's also very much needed, and adding 2 more weeks to our bilingual facilitators schedule so that she can be available in the summer for things like a shared residency, verification, registration, and other things. Again, these are fairly minor in the scope of things, but we added an EL lead district stipend for $5,000, probably EL district lead, but this is an existing EL teacher that's taking on some district responsibilities. And then I did want to note, with something we've discussed, we increased the middle school and high school administrator salary schedules by $6,000 to acknowledge the very high number of after school and evening and even weekend events that require covering. So that is being acknowledged in that change. This is a big one, not a minor one, but funds for new teacher Chromebooks and teacher devices, just on the kind of refreshing schedule for those devices, is another $408,000 in this year's budget. That really is the high-level view of the budget and where do the dollars go. And those are, again, since most of it's people, that's where most of the dollars go. But certainly take any questions from the board.
Charles? On the having 2 high school guidance counselors, are you anticipate one being a 9th grade and one being a 10th, or?
That would really be a decision at the principal level. So I'm not 100% sure how that would be designated.
More of a comment, and really a question on the step increases, and I think we discussed this. If my math was correct, I believe it was on average about a 2% increase.
On average, a step increase for certainly on the teacher salary schedule, the average is 2-ish.
Oh, I'm sorry, like
Between steps.
Between steps.
It varies, but yes.
And rough math, I was coming up with about 2%. And that's separate from the 3%, correct? So this within steps could be recognizing up to a 5% increase. So, okay.
Some more, some less, yeah.
Some more, some less, okay.
Yep.
All right.
In a lot of places, it's one or the other and not both.
Historically, that has happened, yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Just reading my mind.
That's right, yes.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right.
Some folks, if they're gonna do a percentage increase on the step scale, they don't do the step also.
Right.
Yeah.
And so sometimes when you hear from the state, we're gonna do a such and such, sometimes that means one of those, but not both. So I'm proud that we can work this into the budget to, put these dollars where they make the most difference. Can you go over the high school, the new hires, what subjects you're hiring for or have already hired for?
In just a second, I can.
I will say while you're looking, I'm excited about the additional guidance counselor. I think that's such a pivotal role to put each of these kids in contact with someone who knows them, knows their interests, can kind of steer them in a career path that will, ensure that they get a good, successful start when they leave us. I'm glad we're working that one in.
Not the one I was looking. You got it? Oh, Ms. Millspot?
We have a school counselor, a high school interventionist, an EL teacher, a 2 English teacher, high school English, 2 high school math teachers, 2 high school chemistry teachers, a high school social studies teacher, high school Spanish, high school art teacher, a high school functional skills teacher, and a high school PE teacher. I go too fast.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. Perfect.
Other item, I would say that it's no small feat that 0% increase on health insurance for the premiums. That's tremendous.
Did I skip by that one?
Yeah,
You
Dr.
did.
I did not intend to skip by that one.
I was trying to help you out. So,
Thank you. No, I'm so glad you pointed that
I
out.
noticed it too, and I thought, ooh, maybe that's not true anymore.
It is 100% true.
Excellent.
It is a 0% increase,
And
and
that's-
we are very proud of
I would
that.
say that is huge. I just attest on, from what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing, there are big increases coming from a lot of companies out there. So that is major. Not to mention that, a percent increase on health insurance doesn't equate across the board. Given the salary schedule, it has a greater impact for those who are making more or just on a lower level. So this is huge. This is an additional something I commend you and your team for getting. So thank you.
Well, thank you, and thank you for highlighting that. I would have been ashamed to leave out.
And just again, to echo my colleague's sentiments, the fact that we had that conversation about making sure we're competitive in our set for teacher salaries so we can attract and retain. And then I have an arithmetic question probably for Ms. Rosales. I know that I have my faculty do the same thing at work. from a process perspective, the step increases calculated first, and then we add the 3% on top of that number. So, that piece, okay,
Recognize it.
great.
For the sake of what you're going to see, but in our process behind the scenes. We do roll the teacher first to their next step, and then apply the scenarios.
Great, thank you for that. I don't blame Mr. Adler for that slide getting skipped.
He messed it up before.
That's
you-
right.
Any other discussion from the board? Thanks for all the work. None? All in favor of approving the 23-24 fiscal year budget, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is discussion action on TSBA Volunteer of the Year nomination.
Harold?
Yes, I just wanted to report on this, I guess, to the public. We had some conversations internally between board members and myself back and forth. And I think the decision could probably be encapsulated in saying that we have so many great volunteers and so many folks that are worthy of recognition that really what this needs, and what we're talking about is the TSBA has an annual way to recognize volunteers in each school system can nominate those volunteers, that what we really need is a formal process for determining who that person is, just to make sure we're not, make sure we're leaving no stone unturned, I guess. So what we've discussed and kind of the current proposal is that we're going to add Volunteer of the Year to the same timetable that we identify the Teacher of the Year, which means in early January, we as a district will solicit nominations from the various organizations in Lakeland school system. School would be able to nominate booster clubs, PTA, PTO, LEF, any of these groups that support the school with volunteer hours, and have just not something too overwhelming, but a nomination process where a small committee could evaluate those applications essentially, and then bring a consensus pick to the board. So that would mean that this year we're not going to submit somebody, but I do think it means moving forward and hopefully, in perpetuity, that we'd have a good process that we can feel good about. And then also, I think that the candidate would feel like cause them to be recognized appropriately. So there's no action that I'm requesting on this item. And thanks for the board's input.
All right.
I have a question.
Any discussion? Yes, ma'am.
Well, I don't know the details, but as I'm hearing that and seeing our wonderful students out there, there's also a Student of the Year, but I think it's for juniors.
I think you're right.
I think it's
Yep.
junior, but I don't want to say the wrong grade. But when we get to that point, maybe we could also consider having a formal process for that as well, because we have some really amazing students, and when we get to the grade that TSBA recognizes, we may want to submit one of our amazing students to go up against others across the state for their achievements, and we could also make sure they know what the criteria is for that.
Well, and you make another good point. If we could add it with the board's consent, add it to the annual agenda for January now, the TSBA volunteer and / student of the year, that would be great.
Those are actually two separate items, right? Would
Would
be
be.
two separate processes? Can we
Yes.
add those as two separate
Sure,
items?
yeah.
Okay.
So the submission date is May the 1st. So by getting this done in January, we have time to put the application together and,
Yep,
okay.
that would be good.
Mr. Burnett?
And then, Dr. Hall, I know that mirrors the conversations I think that we've also had about having some type of a formal process to recognize just volunteers who get nominated by each of those 100 SSOs that we currently have. So that we are able to say thank you regardless of whether you got the district nomination, you were recognized by your peers in the SSO or other group that you work in.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for noting that.
There's a student recognition award and there's a student volunteer recognition award. So we need to, that's 3 total things.
3
we
items.
wanna-
Yes.
while we're recognizing people.
Just cancel everything else in January.
That's right, that's what we'll do, that's what we'll do. Any more discussion on this item? So you've got those down for our annual agenda, even if they don't apply possibly till kids' 11th grade years, we've got it on the calendar.
Well, it might be that next year, we announce to the students, hey, here's the criteria, because some of that may encompass their freshman and sophomore and junior years. You know, if they may want to step up their volunteer work if they want to be considered for volunteer of the year their junior year, so.
All right, any more discussion on this item? Hearing none, next item.
Next item is review the superintendent evaluation.
I'll speak a little bit to this item. So, Dr. Horrell, this is, make sure I say it right. This is, we're talking about the instrument to approve or process. Is it the approval or just the review of the instrument that we've used?
Basically, thank you, yeah, basically our school board policy says that we would agree on a process mutually between the board and the superintendent. So this is the process by which we just review that and make sure we're on the same page. And the thought this year, previously discussed, is that the timeline would be that the official board evaluation, the presentation of the evaluation would be in June, at the June meeting, which means that the board would complete their evaluations in May. And I do realize what a busy time of year that is, but that was the proposal.
So, I believe it was last year's, the proposal being brought forward or whatever was to take and use last year's tool, the same one we had last year.
Just the board,
Yes.
just the
Yes,
board
the board
evaluation tool. So,
Any
Yes.
discussion or items that the board has concern with on the evaluation instrument?
Newbie, so I'm gonna trust what you guys did.
I would just say that I appreciate, I like the instrument we used last year. I think I'm comfortable with it because it gives me the opportunity to give valid feedback to Dr. Horrell.
Comfortable with it as long as Dr. Horrell is.
I am, thank you.
So, do we need any formal action to take to be able to use that instrument?
I
or-
don't believe so.
Okay, all right. Any more discussion on use of the board evaluation instrument? All right, next item.
Next item is review of policy manual, section 6, first half.
Is there any policies the board would like to bring forth?
We have none, the committee has none.
Or feedback on that or any other policy, of course, a board member can bring forward at any time. All right, hearing none, next item.
Next item is discussion action on approval of the family life curriculum.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor? We have a motion, is there a second? Have a motion and a second. Dr. Orr, would you like to speak to this item?
I will speak to it, although I've had very little to do with it, I'll admit. And I want to recognize again Blake Warren, our coordinated school health supervisor, who did have a lot to do with this. And basically, this is just meeting the board policy that requires that the board approve the family life curriculum. And this is specifically the 9th grade family life curriculum. So perhaps in the motion, if you make the motion to approve the 9th grade family life curriculum, just so we're on the same page. As I explained to the board, it is taken essentially from the health textbook that has been adopted by the board, but Ms. Warren has gone through those items and made sure that everything in them is compliance with state law and the regulations of family life curricula.
So is it best for us to amend the motion, or would you?
I believe that was the agenda item. I believe the motion could still be a motion to approve the 9th grade family life curriculum.
We have the motion on the floor to approve the family life curriculum. I'll make a motion to amend it to approve the family life curriculum for 9th grade. Is there a second?
Second.
So we have a motion and a second on changing the approval to actually just the family life curriculum for 9th grade. Any discussion on that? Hearing none. Oh, sorry.
Oh, we're on amending the motion, I'm
Yes,
sorry.
yes. So hearing none on amending just the actual motion to the family life curriculum for 9th grade. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so now we are back on the main motion of approval of the family life curriculum for 9th grade. Now discussion on this item.
So I think my only concern with it is typically we would have had a work session and then a business meeting, and we would have had a week or more to review. I did not get this until Friday, So I will be honest in that I'm going to have to abstain from voting tonight because I've not had a chance to review it. And so I don't feel like I had appropriate notice, appropriate time to do so. That's my absolute only concern with it.
Or discussion on this item? Jeremy, would you like to make a motion to, is it a problem if we potentially had it, is it time critical?
It is time critical, unfortunately.
Well, it will be taught after TCAPS.
Is taught after TCAPS. The reason it's time critical is, and this may give you some reassurance, is that there is a required period by which parents have the opportunity to review the family life curriculum and make the decision about whether or not their students.
And I think as you also referenced, this one might be a question for you. Parents have currently the opportunity to opt out, but as Ms. Childs has presented, there's a possibility that there will be a requirement to opt in moving forward. Or am I misremembering some of those legislative items?
It's one of the many pieces of legislation that I think is being considered, so it is certainly a possibility, yes.
Not to put you on the spot, how comfortable are you that there's no divisive, I'm going to use the wrong word, controversial concepts or any items of concern?
Age appropriate is probably the one that would come in for this
Yeah.
one, yeah.
I apologize for putting you on
And
the
we
spot.
hit the button so it turns red. There you go.
This was the moment I've been dreading. I'm just kidding. All of these standards, wellness standards, I have discussed with Ms. Martin and Dr. Horrell if there's a need to separate boys and girls to deliver some of the material as far as the reproductive systems and some of the other items. That is certainly a possibility that we could do that if that makes parents and board members more comfortable.
Is that the intent with some of this? How does that work?
No, sir, it's not necessarily a requirement. I did reach out to Arlington and Germantown, and they do boys and girls together. It's just taught in the lifetime wellness classes, so it is all taught together. But some parents may view it as sensitive material, but for a 14-year-old or a 15-year-old, it should be pretty standard material. Biology and anatomy and physiology.
I read all of it. I didn't get a chance to watch all the videos, but I did read it. I mean, I personally have, each parent has to choose for their own students, but I have a boy and a girl, and I actually appreciate when each of them understands the other biology, because it's comes up in regular conversation with high school students, and so it's often good if they know what the other one's talking about, especially hearing it from an adult who actually knows what they're talking about, because sometimes the peers don't always have the right information, I found. Overall, it seemed like it, meets the requirements in a very conservative manner, per state legislature. I guess the only specific question I had was on one of the handouts, or not handouts, but textbook page, it kind of gave a little blurb at the top about rape. I assume the teacher has some kind of lead-in, or because obviously we know kids have been abused before. Definitely. And certain topics can be sensitive and just kind of the way the box pops up. But again,
Yes.
I do understand these are pages taken kind of out of order because you're just making sure we understand this specific part of this.
Correct, and there is a training for all teachers who will be teaching family life curriculum. I will be leading that training, and we discuss very specifically what you are to teach, how you are to phrase things. So those sections will definitely be addressed in that training for the teachers.
Yeah, as a social worker, I think it's affirming to talk about that because you're going to have kids that have been raped or sexually abused in your audience, and
Yes.
sometimes, they've never told anybody, and that might be the opportunity when they do, end up pulling a teacher aside, or just hearing affirming words about the situation. So, I'm glad that that is in there, and also like what's unhealthy in a relationship in that piece, and
Yes, ma'am. There is a section that we are required to cover for dating violence and for child sexual abuse. So both of those topics will be covered.
I'm glad.
But in a way that's appropriate for ninth graders.
Yes, yes.
So,
Go ahead.
I was gonna just ask, so this is just for clarity for everyone, I know we've got the material in here, but these are standards that are part of the wellness curriculum.
Right,
These are
correct.
state standards that are,
Correct, they're pulled directly from the lifetime wellness standards, yes, ma'am. This is just the section that falls under the family life that we have to give parents an opportunity to opt out of if they so choose. Parents who do, their students will be given an alternative assignment to complete during that week.
point out, these are state standards, and the Tennessee Code was listed for each one of them too, which I appreciated. And every grade level has its own, this is every year, so it sort of, builds up to this. And I am thankful that you kind of gleaned through, you gleaned the most impactful, important parts. And I appreciate our lifetime wellness teachers for teaching this sensitive
too.
material, don't you too? Yeah.
Me too, they do a great job, so I'm thankful to have them.
Yeah. So thank you. Thanks for putting this together.
Yes, ma'am, thank you all.
For discussion on this item?
For me, it's just asking the question that, see what I see, but what do I not see?
Yes,
Is there
sir.
anything that's gonna come up and surprise us?
Not that let me rephrase that, no. The
Thank
training
you.
is going to cover that you teach what is presented, you teach the pages that are presented and the resources for the students, you don't go beyond that. Any questions that come up, you say, ask an adult in your life, a trusted adult in your life. They are not to give opinions.
Yes. Those sensitive subjects that are brought up, those are directly referred to a counselor or somebody who is appropriate.
Yes,
skill
sir,
set.
we teach the teachers, ask your parents or trusted adult.
So I understand to ask an appropriate adult in your life. Are kids in this process taught that we do have resources at the school for them, that certainly if they don't feel comfortable with their parent, like they might have not felt, might be related to
Yes.
something at home or something? I mean, do we indicate through this process?
We can definitely indicate that in the teacher training, that if they are not comfortable reaching out to a parent or someone in their home, or like Ms. Childs said, if the abuse is happening in the home, that there are people at school who are trusted and who they are available for them to talk to and reach out to.
You have processes that kick in if that is the case, where a
Yes.
parent or adult is excluded from that initial conversation.
That would go through our counselors.
Item? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is discussion action on the 23-24 salary schedules.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
So move.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Hoare, would you like to speak to this item?
Yes, this typically accompanies the budget. The budget that the board has approved is based on these salary schedules, but our policy also requires that the board approve the salary schedules themselves, and we try to update those very regularly or appropriately, word I'm looking for, but every time. We do it every time. So we're presenting these to you as well.
Any discussion on this item? I do have a question, just for clarity. So this, like you said, is this incorporating the,
So this includes the 3% and the 2%. So these are the salaries that,
so it just be this salary? It won't be that there's another 3% later or 2%, this?
that's a great question, thank you. Yes, if anybody sees these, there's
This
not
is it.
another 3 or 2% on top of
Okay,
this. This
right.
includes it, yes.
So this includes all the steps and everything that, okay.
The budget was built from these salary schedules, yes.
They can take their current and increase by, I'm sorry, they can take their current step and increase by 1, and that would be where they are for next year.
This includes, though, the 3% on that, and then where appropriate, the 2%. Oh, okay.
They're all,
So that is the number, just, okay. Say that repeatedly, that is the number.
you got it.
Right,
There ain't no more. That's it. Ain't no more. Whatever's on there.
any discussion on this item? Or any more discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is the discussion action on the 23-24 stipend list.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
This is related to that. It's not the salary schedule, but this is the stipend list for not only our coaches, but those who get stipends for extra work that they do in the fine arts, things like yearbook. There's a number of categories that are covered in here. I will note that on the stipends for coaches, things like band director, choir director, yearbook, those are tied to the bachelor's step 0 teacher salary schedule. So when the teacher salary schedule goes up 3%, the stipends for those things go up 3%. I will note again that this reflects some initiative of this board and previous boards on wanting to make sure that not only our teachers and staff, but our coaches were appropriately compensated for the insane number of hours that they put into making sure that kids are learning and growing and leading in athletics and fine arts as well as academics. So there is a relationship there. And to answer your question, Ms. Harrison, those have already been applied. Well, they don't even have to be applied because
Yes.
typically they're different categories.
But they've already been applied
Yeah, they have
to
been
the
applied
budget.
to the budget, yes.
Yes.
And then last year, we did the stipend, because it was a little bit late, we did the administrative stipend for the overseeing of the athletics, and now we're adding the $6,000 to
Those
the-
go away and are now part of their salary
Right,
schedule. Yes, thank
right.
you for pointing that out.
So, and can you explain the removal of the school support organization secretary stipend and the nutrition? Is that because we, did we change those positions? I see the line through it, so that's what I'm asking. Did we change those? Were those the ones we changed this year? To a
No, we're just changing who's responsible for those areas. And make sure it's in the mic, if you will. That's all right. Ms. Millspaw?
So previously, before we had a nutrition coordinator, there was some duties on the school bookkeeper, or I'm sorry, the financial secretaries is the correct term. And same for the school support organization secretary duties. Those were on a school financial secretary. The SSO secretary duties have now been put on the new administrative assistant in the central office. And then, of course, the nutrition secretary duties have been put on the nutrition coordinator. So those stipends are going away.
discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
No further items on the agenda.
Do we have any announcements?
I have one.
Ms. Thomas?
The City of Lakeland put out an announcement this afternoon. A lot of people want a tangible way to help our neighbors in Covington with their tremendous loss from the tornadoes. So the City of Lakeland's going to be collecting items at IH Clubhouse Wednesday and Thursday from 4 to 7, and Friday from 12 to 4. And what they're looking for is non-perishable food that doesn't need to be cooked. And they have examples, canned food, peanut butter, jelly, bread, toiletry items, diapers and wipes, bottled water or drinks, Ziploc bags, storage containers, and school supplies. And I know there's also an Amazon wish list that's, I think, just school supplies. So this is a great opportunity to, a lot of us spend a lot of time during the week and on weekends at different events where we make friends with, these are our neighbors. And I know that if the situation were reversed, we would have people coming to try to help us. So if you can help, you can look it up on the City of Lakeland's Facebook page to get the hours and the things that they're looking for.
I just wanted to say thank you to Germantown School Board for hosting me to come and visit them last week. Superintendent Manuel and their entire board were welcoming. I saw a couple of things that they do a little different than us, a couple of things that we do different that I really appreciate that we do different, and one or two things I'll follow up with Dr. Horrell to consider to bring some of the practices they do that I'd like us to consider.
Just wanted to say that, talking about the coaches that spend so much time with students, I just found out that, the high school boys soccer team just won their game right now. So congratulations.
Yay.
Hey, congratulations to them. Vested interest in that.
Would like to thank and congratulate the PTA for a wonderful event,
Yes.
Lakeland Nights. It was, just gets better every year. It's amazing. The cakes get, they get better and costlier every year. So, but it all goes to a great cause. Between the PTA and PTO, I think they do tremendous work, and would also like to thank all the students in the crowd tonight. It's always an honor to have some fans watching us. I think they're fans, so that's what we're going to claim.
Yes.
The meetings are usually about 25 minutes. Y'all really picked a good one.
Oh, yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
Next time you might want
This
to
is a little
consult with
long.
us.
They picked the wrong meeting.
Also, I want to give a shout out to our drama, our
Oh, thank you,
theater.
yes.
The show was fantastic. If you didn't get to see it, it just filled up that great big stage. They did such a great job. All the kids and their parents and Mr. White and Miss Garland. It was really awesome. And we have so many things going on now. We were at our first baseball game last week, and you know, there's a game going on over here and a practice over here, and it's that happy hum of activity that I know we all envisioned would one day take place in little old Lakeland, and it's here the first year. So it's so exciting to see how many ways we grow, and I'm thankful for everybody who's helping in that effort.
I don't think senior walk,
Yes, the senior walk is coming up. What's the date? It's
May
May
18th.
18th. At
9:15.
Lakeland, 10 a.m.?
9:15.
9:30.
9:30.
So they show up at 9:15.
That was
because they
Miss
might-
Lockhart, she knows.
Because they might not be ready at 9:30 if we tell them. Yeah, so be there by 9:15. Senior walk is a great tradition at Lakeland Elementary. Once a lion, always lion. Right, Miss Lockhart? Once a lion, always lion. On that note, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
I have a motion. Is there a second?
second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. We are adjourned.